We have an opening bit where actors enter, a first directed address, a first audience interaction, an introduction to the piece. We've got our first ensemble piece, which is kind of the beginning of the lockdown or the pandemic. Where were you? Maybe a solo piece, an interview piece around this idea of this is all bullshit, what's going on, confusion. I'll come back to the audience later. What were the fears? These are just free writing bits, or the actors can share their fears to go into this first questioning bit where we're asking, well, why are you afraid of this? We know what that is, I don't need to go too much into it. The pots and pans, we've got 3 pots and pans transitions to support frontline workers. They get weaker and weaker as we go along, and we understand that this is staying for a long time, and we stop kind of supporting them or showing that kind of shift in that. Hairdresser musical. This is the show, the beginning of the reopening of services and being careful what you talk about and all that kind of stuff. We have Vera's story about a woman after the first lockdown who decided, fuck it, I'm going out, and then died a few weeks later. She was old. A rules transition, and the rules get crazier and crazier. This idea of, do you know anyone who died, actually, personally? That goes into questioning, and then we're going to hear from the frontline workers from the trenches, first-hand accounts through the interviews that we've gathered that, yes, hospitals, people who have suffered from COVID, people that work with people that are dying, it's a hellhole. This idea of rising anxiety needs to happen somewhere in here. Until we get to the last pots and pans where no one's doing it anymore because we're tired of it. We don't need to know it. Cameron Garage text, what we're not talking about, the repercussions of this on the frontline workers, on families, all these things. This idea of protecting people at work, but then coming home and potentially not protecting the people you should be protecting, your family, so that balance of things. I wanted to do a movement piece around the lack of intimacy, not touching. I think that could be really beautiful. Letter to the editor, this is when people start getting a little frustrated with everything that's going on. Bit of racism, people don't want to talk to us about what's going on in their jobs. Peg's story about that, people are resistant to say too much. This is when we're tired of everything, and this is kind of when we start revolting against everything that's going on. We're asking people, watch out for the bag there. When did you start breaking rules? People broke rules at Christmas. When have you broken rules? When did you stop caring? When did your mind change about things? The beginning of conspiracy theories. I read somewhere that fake news, the mismatch of everyone's personal versus the collective. Around New Year's, end of life, we need to ask ourselves what choices do we make? Around end-of-life caring or older people, that kind of thing. We still want some levity, funny things in this thing. Does the timeline disintegrate around here? If I was Bonnie Henry, this is the debate game we would play based on what the Constitution means to me. This idea of why are restaurants open and not theaters? Who gets to decide that? What are our points of view? We're heading towards the ending. Vaccines, we're unsure what that looks like yet. Big ending, vaccines, recovery, resilience, trauma. What does recovery look like? The new normal, this or that, home or care home, school, no school, old versus young. All these philosophical, ethical debates that we have to take on. I'm going to go back this way just to talk about the audience things we have. We have some where were yous where people get to share photos, questionnaires that the audience can answer. Getting the audience to participate in a pep talk as like an intermission thing maybe. Asking them when they broke the rules, how did they break the rules, did they rat on a neighbor. Get 2 people to share difficult things that have experienced. This is an idea of meeting the person next to you. My numbers game, which is a game we play where everyone shares a number that means something to them during COVID, and maybe the cast tries to guess what the numbers meant. Some more photos and other audience ideas. Find the first COVID-related photo. Doom scrolling. How did you break a rule? Who's the worst rule breaker among us? We can ask them questions. They can text or tweet yes or no or vote. Photos of people who have died. Lots of photo things. I think we need to find some other rules, other things. We have a visual of the website that does all the stats. That's an idea. And then we think we're missing maybe a bit of parenting, a bit of youth experience. We might be missing some group things, although I think we've solved a few problems. Isolation, do we talk enough about it? Is there enough physical bits, or is it just talking? And this idea of the feelings shifting through time, and I think the idea of that is that in March, something was very new to us, and now a year later, we don't really care about it anymore because we've